It's time for the Roots and Roots Show with your host, Greg Rashid, bringing you history and music from the Black American diaspora. Greg and his guests' goal is to root the show's information in your psyche, providing you the roots to expand knowledge within your community. Now here's your host, Greg Rashid.
I want to say Swadee Kap to everyone out there. That means hello in Thai, because I'm here in Bangkok, Thailand. So happy to be on here today, especially on this day, because a lot of you who are listening live on KUHSdenver.com, created by the great Henry Archuleta, at 3 p.m. Mountain Time today. You're listening on January 15th, which is the birthday of the supreme, the amazing Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And the celebration has been taking place over the weekend. Not much really going on here in Thailand, but I do my bit. Every year since 2002, I did my first King tribute on Denver DC TV, Denver Cable. I did one with on my old sports show with the Nuggets over at the Rec Center in Park Hill. And just so happy to continue that legacy of doing it, be it on cable, be it on radio. I always do a tribute to Dr. King on his birthday, and we're going to do that today. And we're just going to get right into it, because what I'm going to be doing, I'll be playing some music, and then you'll hear his speeches. And if you're here to hear I Have a Dream, if you believe that the whole myth about Dr. King being this dreamer, someone sitting on a rocking chair, just whittling his life away, then you don't know anything about Dr. King. I suggest that you really listen to this show, pick up some of his books, and stop believing what the myth makers want you to believe about Dr. King. But and I'll get into a little bit later on. But right now, we're going to get into it right now. Start with a song. I think I'll do this one. And a lot of these songs they're very rare. They're very rare, and I'm going to start with Brother Will Hurston. And this is Reverend King Had a Time. So let's hear that on the Root and Root Show.
Reverend King had a time. Reverend King had a time. King had a hard time. King had a time. I said, keep a marching, people, and don't be afraid. Reverend Martin Luther King have been shot dead. They asked Reverend King, said, do you want to wait? He said, loving everybody is greater than hate. He said, all of my people don't have to fail, because I am going to be there in your. I don't know about anybody else, but we will have to conquer the fear of death. Well, they tell me Reverend King began to walk. I heard a lot of people begin to talk. They're peeping out the windows and they looking out the door. Time has been, it won't be no more. Reverend King had a time. Reverend King had a time. King had a hard time. King had a time. Reverend King had a dream. It was late one night now. Everybody knew that he didn't look right now. Tell me that his eyes were filled with tears from the trouble that he had down through the years. He told everybody to take their stand now. I just viewed over in the promised land now. If I die, my work is done now. My battle's been fought and the victory won now. I keep on singing, I'll overcome now. The people all around didn't look very happy. The man taking over was Ralph Abernathy. He said, oh Lord, will you show me the way? And they reminded me of Moses and Joshua way. Reverend King had a time. Reverend King had a time. King had a hard time. I said the people all around wasn't looking very well. He was shot from the back of the other hotel. The killer may run, but he can't get away. The law gonna track him down one day. The killer may run and he may go, but he gonna reap that what he sowed. The time of day was just about 6, so they tell me Reverend King was in a bad fix. They call the Black House, the White House too, and like zigzag lightning they call we're through. Now everybody around began to cry, and they began to bid Reverend King goodbye. So the president sent out the FBI. Now they called Mrs. King on the telephone. They tell me that the woman wept and moaned. She folded her arms and began to cry. She chartered her plane and began to fly. They asked Mrs. King, said, where you going, please? She said, a ticket to Memphis, Tennessee. She said, oh my Lord, will you hear my cry? I know my husband was born to die. Reverend King had a time. Reverend King had a time. King had a hard time. I said the early Tuesday morning, it'll very soon now. They begin to have Reverend King funeral now. Time of day, about 10 o'clock. So they tell me everybody had to stop now. Stop 1 minute to give a little moan, because the Reverend King had gone on a home now. The Reverend King funeral was very wide. I said all day long it was televised now. In their heart they began to think now. I heard a mighty noise, they began to sing now. Sung a little song, it wasn't very fast now. Thank God Almighty, I'm a free at last. He's loved by some and hated by others. We keep on marching till we live like brothers. Reverend King had a time. Reverend King had a time. King had a hard time. Great God Almighty, King had a time. Had a time.
At the very same time that America refused to give the Negro any land, through an act of Congress, our government was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest. But not only did they give the land, they built land-grant colleges with government money to teach them how to farm. Not only that, they provided county agents to further their expertise in farming. Not only that, they provided low interest rates in order that they could mechanize their farms. Not only that, today many of these people are receiving millions of dollars in federal subsidies not to farm, and they are the very people telling the black man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. Now, this is what we are faced with, and this is the reality. Now, when we come to Washington, in this campaign, we are coming to get our check.
Said what the world said, boy. That tells him what he done. He taught nonviolence as he went marching along. He song. He said, free. I'm free. He said, free. Lord, I'm free. He said, thank God Almighty, I'm free. And he told us to remember that day. Remember that day. When I tried to give you life, brother, love, he said, remember that day. Remember that day. When I tried to love somebody, remember that day. Remember that day. Remember that day. When I tried to do right but the wrong, he said, remember that day. Remember that day. When I tried to be the home, yeah. Remember that day, yeah. When I tried to close the night, yeah.
Earlier today by Ray Moore.
You have had attempts made on your life and have been threatened perhaps even tonight. What is it like to walk under this constant threat?
Well, it's often difficult, but when you live with it so long, you almost become immune to being afraid as a result of these threats. I guess you have to come to the point of looking at these things philosophically, and this is where I have decided to stand. I believe firmly that this cause is right, and that someone must have the courage and the fortitude to stand up for it, even if it means suffering or even if it means death. And I have always felt that unmerited suffering is redemptive, and even if I have to die for this cause, if physical death is the price that others will have to pay, then it is a price that is paid to free the soul of our nation and to free our children from a permanent spiritual death. And in this sense, I think it is very redemptive, or it can be, even if it occurs.
Thank you, Dr. King.
On April the 4th, 1968, on the balcony floor of the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee, a young man who was a great subservience to our country was slain. A few days later, we stood there in the same location and paid our tributes. And looking out across the weeded area, where a cruel man stood and stole the life of our fallen leader. Sorrow came in our hearts. Words entered our mouth. Thoughts filled my mind. And it aroused our emotions. Our only endeavor was to conquer the thoughts, to soothe the sorrow, and to motivate the words. And from that point, a life story of Dr. King was written. We don't have time to tell you the story in its entirety. They told us it would make the record too long. But I want to let you know today that like Joseph in the Bible days, he fought. Oh, yes, he did. I know he tried, yeah. I know he loved humanity. Oh, yeah. He laid for his friend. He was someone like Moses, you know. He went to the mountaintop. This is what he told his dad. He said, if I don't make it, I'm not worried about it. You tell me live. Oh, yes, he is. Oh, love, peace and democracy. He laid
What is it about the Negro? I mean, every other group that came as an immigrant somehow, not easily, but somehow got around it. Is it just the fact that Negroes are black?
White America must see that no other ethnic group has been a slave on American soil. That is one thing that other immigrant groups haven't had to face. The other thing is that the color became a stigma. American society made the Negro's color a stigma. America freed the slaves in 1863 through the Emancipation Proclamation of Abraham Lincoln, but gave the slaves no land or nothing in reality, and as a matter of fact, to get started on. At the same time, America was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that there was a willingness to give the white peasants from Europe an economic base. And yet it refused to give its black peasants from Africa, who came here involuntarily in chains and had worked free for 244 years, any kind of economic base. And so emancipation for the Negro was really freedom to hunger. It was freedom to the winds and rains of heaven. It was freedom without food to eat or land to cultivate, and therefore it was freedom and famine at the same time. And when white Americans tell the Negro to lift himself by his own bootstraps, they don't look over the legacy of slavery and segregation. I believe we ought to do all we can and seek to lift ourselves by our own bootstraps, but it's a cruel jest to say to a bootless man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. And many Negroes, by the thousands and millions, have been left bootless as a result of all of these years of oppression and as a result of a society that deliberately made his color a stigma and something worthless and degrading.
Dr. King had in his heart for his fellow man, regardless of their color. Oh, King, oh, King, oh, Dr. Martin Luther King. For inspiration and interest he had in mankind. Out of all the good things he done, still they tried to push him behind. Oh, King, oh, King, oh, Dr. Martin Luther King. This is what Dr. King wants us to do. Oh, to live together. Why gonna have a job every day? Together. Go to church on Sunday. Together. Hold hands in hand. Together. Because in the war they died together. Oh, King, oh, King, oh, Dr. Martin Luther King. I like to say something else here. It is for non-violence movements, for which he stood. He lived, and I believe he died. Oh, King, oh, King, oh, Dr. Martin Luther King. Listen here, I'd like to say this. She is for greatness, the great dream he had for America.
What did you discuss back in the hotel room?
Nothing, just friends, just like Khrushchev and Kennedy and everybody. When the people, all of the politicians of all other white races come together, and they, although they believe different, they think different, whites can come together and discuss the common cause. But whenever a few of us come together, the world is shook up. And I say, whatever went back there is our business.
Reverend King, do you agree?
Oh, yes, yes. We had a very good discussion on many matters. And, of course, these are not things that we would discuss here, but we do have common problems and common concerns. And above all, as Muhammad Ali has just said, we are all victims of the same system of oppression. And even though we may have different religious beliefs, this does not at all bring about a difference in terms of our concerns.
Still brothers.
Do you share the same, one more question, do you share the same concern that Muhammad has for his draft status?
Oh, I certainly do. My views on the draft are very clear. I'm against it. And I think the sooner our country does away with the draft, the better it will be for everybody. I'm very disturbed about the militaristic posture of our nation. And I think until we have a radical reordering of priorities in our country, we are going more and more to the depths and, I should say, to the doom that follows arrogance of power, as Senator Fulbright said.
I believe I'll tell you about the man right now. He told a scene over the mountaintop. He talked at the White House. He talked at Zion Hill. All the dreams. That is assassin.
Malcolm X, one of the most articulate exponents of the black Muslim philosophy, has said of your movement and your philosophy that it plays into the hands of the white oppressors, that they are happy to hear you talk about love for the oppressor because this disarms the Negro and fits into the stereotype of the Negro as a meek, turning the other cheek sort of creature. Would you care to comment on Mr. X's belief?
Well, I don't think of love as, in this context, as emotional bosh. I don't think of it as a weak force. But I think of love as something strong and that organizes itself into powerful direct action. This is what I tried to teach in the struggle in the South, that we are not engaged in a struggle that means we sit down and do nothing. That there's a great deal of difference between non-resistance to evil and non-violent resistance. Non-resistance leaves you in a state of stagnant passivity and deadened complacency, wherein non-violent resistance means that you do resist in a very strong and determined manner. And I think some of the criticisms of nonviolence, or some of the critics, fail to realize that we are talking about something very strong, and they confuse non-resistance with nonviolent resistance.
He goes beyond that in some of the things I've heard him say that this is deliberately your philosophy of love of the oppressor, which he identifies completely with the nonviolent movement, he says, this philosophy and this movement are actually encouraged by whites because it makes them comfortable. It makes them believe that Negroes are meek, supine creatures.
Well, I don't think that's true. If anyone has ever lived with a nonviolent movement in the South, from Montgomery on through the Freedom Rides and through the sit-in movement and the recent Birmingham movement, and see the reactions of many of the extremists and reactionaries in the white community, he wouldn't say that this movement or this philosophy makes them comfortable. I think it arouses a sense of shame within them often, in many instances. I think it does something to touch the conscience and establish a sense of guilt. Now, so often people respond to guilt by engaging more in the guilt-evoking act in an attempt to drown the sense of guilt. But this approach certainly doesn't make the white man feel comfortable. I think it does the other thing. It disturbs this conscience, and it disturbs this sense of contentment that he's had.
The marvelous words of Martin Luther King. That was him talking about Malcolm X. Because, the press back then in the 60s tried to divide Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, but they can't, if you, some of you may have seen the picture of them together, that they finally got together, and, and Malcolm X spoke at a church in the South at the request of Coretta Scott King, but that's a story in itself. And I hope you're enjoying the music and the words of Dr. King on the Root and Root Show. And before that, we did the Spiritual Consolidators, and that was Dr. King. Then we did Dr. Martin Luther King talking about Muhammad Ali. And before that, we did the Swan Mellarks and Dr. Martin Luther King. Then we did Martin Luther King talking about the roots of white privilege. And all his words are still relevant today. Everything he's saying is still relevant today. And before that, we did the Loving Sisters, a tribute to Dr. King, their tribute. And then before that, we did Martin Luther King talking about the assassination of John Kennedy. Before that, we played the Southerners, and he taught nonviolence. And then we had the words of Dr. Martin Luther King talking about it's time to collect our check. And before that, we started to set off with Brother Will Harrison, Reverend King Had a Time. And by the way, if you listen to that one in particular, and all of them, but in that one in particular, you hear him, you actually hear rap on there. And this was made in 68. A lot of these songs that I play today were in 68. I think the latest one was 70, but I wanted to play some stuff that you're not going to hear anywhere else. If you're going to the parade tomorrow, for some of you who know what I'm talking about in the Denver area, you'll be participating in the parade to honor Dr. King. And I think it's the biggest parade now in America, if I'm not mistaken. But please don't let the corporations turn it into something else. Do something to honor Dr. King. It's more than marching. It's more than that. And continue the legacy after the parade and do some other things. But anyway, we're going to get to more not music here, but we're going to, I'm going to play another version of his speech of why I oppose the war in Vietnam. This was at Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta. This was April 30th, 1967. I hope I can get the whole speech in. But this is, but when he started talking about Vietnam, that was unfortunately the death sentence for Dr. King. And it's a shame. And there are a lot of folks, I don't know, well, I do know the powers that be, why they don't play his speeches about Vietnam or about economics more, and rather play the I Have a Dream speech. But we're going to play this right now. So check it out here on the Root and Root Show.
And as I ponder the madness of Vietnam and search within myself for ways to understand and respond in compassion, my mind goes constantly to the people of that peninsula. I speak not now of the soldiers of each side, not of the military government in Saigon, but simply of the people who have been under the curse of war for almost 3 continuous decades now. I think of them too because it is clear to me that there will be no meaningful solution until some attempt is made to know these people and hear their broken cries. Now let me tell you the truth about it. They must see Americans as strange liberators. Do you realize that the Vietnamese people proclaimed their own independence in 1945 after a combined French and Japanese occupation? And incidentally, this was before the Communist Revolution in China. They were led by Ho Chi Minh. And this is a little-known fact. And these people declared themselves independent in 1945. They quoted our Declaration of Independence in their document of freedom. And yet our government refused to recognize them. President Truman said they were not ready for independence. So we fell victim as a nation at that time of the same deadly arrogance that has poisoned the international situation for all of these years. France then set out to reconquer its former colony. And they fought 8 long, hard, brutal years trying to reconquer Vietnam. You know who helped France? It was the United States of America. It came to the point that we were meeting more than 80% of the war costs. And even when France started despairing of its reckless action, we did not. And in 1954, a conference was called at Geneva, and an agreement was reached because France had been defeated at Dien Bien Phu. But even after that, and even after the Geneva Accord, we did not stop. We must face the sad fact that our government sought, in a real sense, to sabotage the Geneva Accord. Well, after the French were defeated, it looked as if independence and land reform would come through the Geneva Agreement. But instead, the United States came and started supporting a man named D.M., who turned out to be one of the most ruthless dictators in the history of the world. He set out to silence all opposition. People were brutally murdered merely because they raised their voices against the brutal policies of Diem. And the peasants watched and cringed as Diem ruthlessly rooted out all opposition. The peasants watched as all this was presided over by United States influence, and then by increasing numbers of United States troops who came to help quell the insurgency that Diem's methods had aroused. When Diem was overthrown, they may have been happy, but the long line of military dictatorship seemed to offer no real change, especially in terms of their need for land and peace. And who are we supporting in Vietnam today? It's a man by the name of General Key, who fought with the French against his own people, and who said on one occasion that the greatest hero of his life is Hitler. This is who we are supporting in Vietnam today. Oh, our government and the press generally won't tell us these things, but God told me to tell you this morning. The truth must be told. The only change came from America as we increased our true commitments in support of governments which were singularly corrupt, inept, and without popular support. And all the while the people read our leaflets and received regular promises of peace and democracy and land reform. Now they languish under our bombs and consider us, not their fellow Vietnamese, the real enemy. They move sadly and apathetically as we herd them off the land of their fathers into concentration camps where minimal social needs are rarely met. They know they must move or be destroyed by our bombs. So they go, primarily women and children and the aged. They watch as we poison their water, as we kill 1 million acres of their crops. They must weep as the bulldozers roar through their areas preparing to destroy the precious trees. They wander into the towns and see thousands of the children homeless, without clothes, running in packs on the streets like animals. They see the children degraded by our soldiers as they beg for food. They see the children selling their sisters to our soldiers, soliciting for their mothers. We have destroyed their two most cherished institutions, the family and the village. We have destroyed their land and their crops. We have cooperated in the crushing of the nation's only non-communist revolutionary political force, the United Buddhist Church. This is a role our nation has taken, the role of those who make peaceful revolutions impossible by refusing to give up the privileges and the pleasures that comes from the immense profits of overseas investments Now, I'm convinced that if we are to get on the right side of the world revolution, we as a nation must undergo a radical revolution of values. We must rapidly begin to shift from a thing-oriented society to a person-oriented society when machines and computers, profit motives, and property rights are considered more important than people. The giant triplets of racism, militarism, and economic exploitation are incapable of being conquered. A true revolution of values will soon cause us to question the fairness and justice of many of our present policies. On the one hand, we are called to play the Good Samaritan on life's roadside, but that will be only an initial act. One day we must come to see that the whole Jericho road must be changed so that men and women will not be constantly beaten and robbed as they make their journey on life's highway. True compassion is more than flinging a coin to a beggar. A true revolution of values will soon look uneasily on the glaring contrast of poverty and wealth with righteous indignation. It will look across the seas and see individual capitalists of the West investing huge sums of money in Asia, Africa, and South America, only to take the profits out with no concern for the social betterment of the countries, and say this is not just. It will look at our alliance with the landed gentry of Latin America and say this is not just. The Western arrogance of feeling that it has everything to teach others and nothing to learn from them is not just. A true revolution of values will lay hands on the world order and say of war, this way of settling differences is not just. This business of burning human beings with napalm, of filling our nation's homes and with orphans and widows, of injecting poisonous drugs of hate into the veins of peoples normally humane, of sending men home from dark and bloody battlefields, physically handicapped and psychologically deranged, cannot be reconciled with wisdom, justice, and love. A nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death. Oh, my friends, if there is any one thing that we must see today, is that these are revolutionary times. All over the globe, men are revolting against old systems of exploitation and oppression. And out of the wounds of a frail world, new systems of justice and equality are being born. The shirtless and barefoot people of the land are rising up as never before. The people who sat in darkness have seen a great light. They are saying unconsciously, as we say in one of our freedom songs, ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. And it is a sad fact that because of comfort, complacency, a morbid fear of communism, our proneness to adjust to injustice, the Western nations that initiated so much of the revolutionary spirit of the modern world have now become the arch anti-revolutionaries. This has driven many to feel that only Marxism has a revolutionary spirit. Therefore, communism is a judgment against our failure to make democracy real and follow through on the revolutions that we initiated. And our only hope today lies in our ability to recapture the revolutionary spirit and go out into a sometimes hostile world, declaring eternal hostility to poverty, racism, and militarism, With this powerful commitment, we shall boldly challenge the status quo. We shall boldly challenge unjust mores and thereby speed up the day when every valley shall be exalted and every mountain and hill shall be made low. The rough places shall be made plain and the crooked places straight. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed and all flesh shall see it together. A genuine revolution of values means in the final analysis that our loyalties must become ecumenical rather than sectional. Every nation must now develop an overriding loyalty to mankind as a whole in order to preserve the best in their individual societies. This call for a worldwide fellowship that lifts neighborly concern beyond one's tribe, race, class, and nation is in reality a call for an all-embracing, unconditional love for all men. This often misunderstood and misinterpreted concept, so readily dismissed by the niches of the world as a weak and cowardly force, has now become an absolute necessity for the survival of mankind. And when I speak of love, I'm not speaking of some sentimental and weak response. I'm speaking of that force which all of the great religions have seen as the supreme unifying principle of life. Love is somehow the key that unlocks the door which leads to ultimate reality. This Hindu, Muslim, Christian, Jewish, Buddhist belief about ultimate reality is beautifully summed up in the first epistle of John. Let us love one another, for God is love, and every one that loveth is born of God and knoweth God. He that loveth not knoweth not God, for God is love. If we love one another, God dwelleth in us, and his love is perfected in us. Let me say finally that I oppose the war in Vietnam because I love America. I speak out against this war not in anger, but with anxiety and sorrow in my heart, and above all with a passionate desire to see our beloved country stand as the moral example of the world. I speak out against this war because I'm disappointed with America. And there can be no great disappointment where there is no great love. I'm disappointed with our failure to deal positively and forthrightly with the triple evils of racism, economic exploitation, and militarism. We are presently moving down a dead-end road that can lead to national disaster. America has strayed to the far country of racism and militarism. The home that all too many Americans left was solidly structured idealistically. Its pillars were soundly grounded in the insights of our Judeo-Christian heritage. All men are made in the image of God. All men are brothers. All men are created equal. Every man is an heir to a legacy of dignity and worth. Every man has rights that are neither conferred by nor derived from the state. They are God-given. Out of one blood, God made all men to dwell upon the face of the earth. What a marvelous foundation for any home. What a glorious and healthy place to inhabit. But America strayed away, and this unnatural excursion has brought only confusion and bewilderment. It has left hearts aching with guilt and minds distorted with irrationality. It is time for all people of conscience to call upon America to come back home. Come home, America. Omar Khayyam is right, the moving finger writes, and having writ moves on. I call on Washington today I call on every man and woman of goodwill all over America today. I call on the young men of America who must make a choice today to take a stand on this issue. Tomorrow may be too late. The book may close. And don't let anybody make you think that God chose America as his divine messianic force to be a sort of policeman of the whole world. God has a way of standing before the nations with judgment, and it seems that I can hear God saying to America, you are too arrogant. If you don't change your ways, I will rise up and break the backbone of your power, and I'll place it in the hands of a nation that doesn't even know my name. Be still and know that I'm God. Now, it isn't easy to stand up for truth and for justice. Sometimes it means being frustrated. When you tell the truth and take a stand, sometimes it means that you will walk the streets with a burdened heart. Sometimes it means losing a job. It means being abused and scorned. It may mean having a 7 or 8 year old child asking your daddy, why do you have to go to jail so much? I've long since learned that to be a follower of Jesus Christ means taking up the cross. And my Bible tells me that Good Friday comes before Easter. Before the crown we wear, there is the cross that we must bear. Let us bear it. Bear it for truth. Bear it for justice. And bear it for peace. Let us go out this morning with that determination. And I have not lost faith. I'm not in despair, because I know that there is a moral order. I haven't lost faith, because the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. I can still sing, we shall overcome, because Carlyle was right. No lie can live forever. We shall overcome because William Cullen Bryant was right. Truth crushed to earth will rise again. We shall overcome because James Russell Lowell was right. Truth forever on the scaffold, wrong forever on the throne, yet that scaffold sways the future. We shall overcome because the Bible is right. You shall reap what you sow. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to go out and transform the jangling discords of our world into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to speed up the day when justice will roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. With this faith, we will be able to speed up the day when the lion and the lamb will lie down together, and every man will sit under his own vine and fig tree, and none shall be afraid, because the words of the Lord have spoken it. With this faith, we will be able to speed up the day when all over the world we will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last. With this faith, we'll sing it as we are getting ready to sing it now. Men will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. And nations will not rise up against nations, neither shall they study war anymore. And I don't know about you, I ain't gonna study war no more.
The words of Dr. King at Ebenezer Baptist Church, April 30th, 1967, talking about why he opposed the war in Vietnam. And I wish they would play that speech every year, actually every day. You talk about Dr. King rather than playing the I Have a Dream speech, but that's another story. But anyway, hope you enjoyed my tribute to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. today on the Root and Roots Show. And we're going to get ready to get out of here. But if you're in Denver, in the Colorado area, and you're going to participate in the parade, just honor his spirit. It's, just, begin to read some things about Dr. King, and don't let the myth makers tell you how you should celebrate his life and legacy. But anyway, this is Greg Rashid. Go in love and go in peace. Help someone along the way, because you can't help anyone until you help yourself. Help yourself, help a senior, help a young person in your community. And we'll see you next time on the Root and Roots Show. Take care.
Thanks for tuning in. See you next time. And remember, spread the knowledge, share the power.